Ready? Good morning, boys and girls. I wanted to share with you one of my favorite books, If I Ran the Zoo by Dr. Seuss. It's a pretty good zoo, said young Gerald McGrew, and the fellow who runs it seems proud of it too. But if I ran the zoo, said young Gerald McGrew, I'd make a few changes. That's just what I'd do. The lions and the tigers and that kind of stuff, they have up here now are not quite good enough. You see things like these in just any old zoo. They're awfully old-fashioned. I want something new. So I'd open each cage. I'd unlock every pen. Let the animals go and start over again. And somehow or other, I think I could find some beast of a much more unusual kind. A 4-footed lion's not much of a beast. The one in my zoo will have 10 feet at least. 5 legs on the left and 5 more on the right. Then people will stare and they'll say, "What a sight! This zookeeper, new keeper, Gerald's quite keen. That's the gall-darnedest lion I've ever seen." My new zoo, McGrew Zoo, will make people talk. My new zoo, McGrew Zoo, will make people gawk at the strangest odd creatures that ever did walk. I'll get for my zoo a new sort of hen who roosts in another hen's top spot, and then another one roosts in the top knot of his, and another in his, and another in his, and so forth and upward and onward, gee whiz. But that's just a start. I'll do better than that. They'll see me next day in my zookeeper's hat, coming into my zoo with an elephant cat. They'll be so surprised, they'll all swallow their gum. They'll ask, when they see my strange animals come, where do you suppose he gets things like that from? His animals all have such very odd faces. I'll bet he must hunt them in rather odd places. And that's what I'll do, said young Gerald McGrew. If you want to catch a beast you don't see every day, you have to go to places quite out of the way. You have to go to places no others can get to. You have to get cold and you have to get wet too. Up past the North Pole where the frozen winds squeal, I'll go and I'll hunt in a squiggle-mobile and bring back a family of, what do you know? And that's how my new zoo, McGrew Zoo, will grow. I'll hunt in the mountains of Zombatant with helpers who all wear their eyes at a slant and capture a fine fluffy bird called the bustard, who only eats custard with sauce made out of mustard, and also a very fine beast called the fluster, who only eats mustard with sauce made out of custard. I'll catch 'em in caves and I'll catch 'em in brooks. I'll catch 'em in crannies and I'll catch 'em in nooks that you don't read about in geography books. I'll catch 'em in countries that no one can spell, like the country of Mata Fa Pata La Pel. In a country like that, if a hunter is clever, he'll catch up some beasts that you never saw ever. I'll load up 5 boats with a family of jotes whose feet are like cows but wear squirrel skin coats and sit down like dogs but have voices like goats, expecting they can't sing the very high notes. And then I'll go down to the wilds of Nantucket and capture a family of lunks in a bucket. Then people will say, now I like the boy heaps. His new zoo, McGrew Zoo, is growing by leaps. He captures them wild and he captures them meek. He captures them slim and he captures them sleek. What do you suppose he will capture next week? I'll capture one tiny, I'll capture one cute. I'll capture a deer that no hunter would shoot. A deer that's so nice he could sleep in your bed. If it weren't for those horns that he has on his head. And speaking of horns that are just a bit queer, I'll bring back a very odd family of deer. A father, a mother, 2 sisters, a brother, whose horns are connected from one to the other, whose horns are so mixed they can't tell them apart, can't tell where they'd end, and can't tell where they'd start. Each deer's mighty puzzled. He's never found if his horns are hers or the other way around. I'll capture that fat and I'll capture that scrawny. I'll capture that scraggle-foot mulliganawny, a high-stepping animal fast as the wind from the blistering sands of the desert of Zen. This beast is the beast that the brave chieftains ride when they want to go fast to find some place to hide. A mulligatawny is fine for my zoo, and so is a chieftain. I'll bring one back too. In the far western part of southeast North Dakota lives a very fine animal called an eota. But I'll capture one who is much finer in the northeastern west part of South Carolina. When people see him, they will say, now by thunder, this new zoo, McGrew Zoo, is really a wonder. Most beasts are bright, friendly, but still in some lands, some beasts are too dangerous to catch with your bare hands. For those that are ugly and vicious and mean, I'll build a bad animal catching machine. It's rather expensive to build such a kit, but with it a hunter can never get bit. A zoo should have bugs, so I'll capture a thrill whose legs are snarled up in a terrible snarl. And then I'll go out and I'll capture some chugs, some kin shooter, mean shooter, bean shooter bugs. I'll go to the African island of Yurka and bring back a tizzle-topple-tuft mazurka, a kind of cranny with quite a tall throat. His neck is so long if he swallows an oat for breakfast the first day of April, they say, it has to go down such a very long way. and that it gets to his stomach on the 15th of May. I'll bag a big bug who is very surprising, a fellow who has a propeller for rising and zooing around making cross-country hops from Texas to Boston with only 2 stops. Now that sort of thing for a bug is just tops. And when I've caught him, then the next thing you know, I'll go and I'll capture a wild tic-tac-toe with X's that win and with zeros that lose. He'll look mighty good in the zoo of McGrew's. I'll bring back a gusset, a jerkin, a gasket, and also a gooch with the wiles of Nantasket. And 8 Persian princes will carry the basket, but with their names are, I don't know. I don't ask it. In a cave of Katroon lives a beast called the Natch that no other hunter's been able to catch. He's hidden for years in the cave with a pout, and no one's been able to make him come out. But I'll coax him out with a wonderful meal that's cooked by my cooks in my cooker-mobile. Then fix up a dish that is just to his taste. 3 chicken croquets made of library paste. Then sprinkle with peanut, shucks, pickled and spiced. Then baked at 600 degrees and then iced. It's mighty hard cooking to cook up such feast, but that's how the new zoo, McGrew's Zoo, gets beast. I'll go to the faraway mountains of Topskin near the river of Nobskin, and I'll bring back an Opskin, a sort of kind of a thingamaboskin, who only eats rhubarb and corn on the cobskin. Then people will flock to my zoo in a mopskin. McGrew, they will say, does such a wonderful jobskin, who he hunts with such vim and he hunts with such vigor. His new zoo, McGrew Zoo, gets bigger and bigger. And speaking of birds, there's a Russian Poloskin whose head skin is red skin and belly is blue skin. I'll get one of them for my Zooski McGrewski. Then the whole town will gasp, why this boy never sleeps. No keeper before ever keep what he keeps. There's no telling what that young fellow will do. And then, just to show them, I'll sail to Katroo and bring back it, an Itchkin, a Prep, and a Prue, a Nurgle, a Nerd, and a Seersucker too. I'll hunt in the jungles of Hippo no Humpus and bring back a flock of wild Bippo Bungus and Bippo Bungus from the Hippie no Humpus, and better than those down in Dipponodungus, and smarter than those out of Nippy no Nungus, and that's why I'll catch 'em in Hippie no Humpus instead of those others in Nungus and Dungus. And people will say, when they have seen these Bimps bounding, the zookeeper, new keeper, simply astounded. He travels so far that you'd think he would drop. When do you suppose this young fellow will stop? Stop? Well, I should. But I won't stop until I've captured the Fizz-Ma Whiz-Ma deal, and the world's biggest bird from the island of Guac, who only eats pine nuts and spits out the bark. And boy, When I get him back home to my park, the whole world will say, young McGrew's made his mark. He's built a zoo better than Noah's whole ark. These wonderful, marvelous beasts that he chooses have made him the greatest of all the McGrewses. Wow, they'll all cheer. What's this zoo must be worth? It's the darnest zoo on the face of the earth. Yes, that's what I'll do, said Gerald McGrew. I'd make a few changes if I ran a zoo.